The maintenance corridors of Port Meridian smelled like burnt metal and stale recycled air. Nira pressed herself against the cold wall, her breath coming in short gasps as heavy footsteps echoed somewhere behind her. The bioluminescent markings on her arms pulsed faintly beneath the torn sleeves of her jacket, and she cursed them silently. They always gave her away when fear took hold. She'd only wanted something to eat. 3 days without food had driven her to desperation, and the market district had seemed so crowded, so easy. But the moment her fingers had closed around the protein bar, someone had noticed the faint shimmer of her skin. Then came the shouting, the pointing, the inevitable cry of freak that followed her everywhere. Port Meridian was supposed to be different. The propaganda broadcasts promised that everyone was welcome at the great crossroads station, where 100 different species mingled and traded. But Nira had learned long ago that everyone didn't include people like her. The colonists from New Terra considered her markings a sign of genetic contamination. They'd rejected her at birth, leaving her in the station's orphanage with nothing but a number and a warning label. Another corridor, another turn. Her legs ached and hunger made her dizzy. Behind her, the security forces were coordinating through their comm systems. She could hear their clipped voices bouncing off the metal walls. They wouldn't stop. They never did. People like her weren't allowed to simply disappear into the crowds. Nira stumbled into a broader passage lined with storage units and workshop bays. Emergency lights cast everything in shades of amber and shadow. Most of the businesses here were closed for the night cycle, their doors sealed tight. She tried 3 of them, desperation mounting, but the locks held firm. The footsteps grew louder, her markings flared brighter, tracing lines up her arms like living circuitry. When she was very young, an orphanage worker had told her they were beautiful, like constellations drawn on skin. That worker had been fired the next day. Beauty wasn't supposed to look like contamination. She was reaching for another door when it suddenly slid open from within. A hand grabbed her wrist and pulled her inside with surprising gentleness. The door sealed behind her immediately, muffling the sounds of pursuit. Nira spun around, ready to fight or flee, but stopped when she saw her rescuer. He was young, maybe 25, with dark hair that looked like it hadn't seen a proper cut in months, and grease stains on his worn work coveralls. His brown eyes studied her with curiosity rather than fear, and that alone was enough to make her pause. "Security's looking for someone," he said quietly, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. "I'm guessing that's you." Nira pulled her arms close to her body, trying to hide the glow, but she knew he'd already seen it. Everyone always saw it. "I'll leave," she whispered. "I didn't mean to. Relax." He held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I didn't open that door to turn you in." He glanced at a monitor mounted on the wall, showing the corridor outside. 3 security officers were searching the passage, checking doors. "But you might want to stay quiet for a few minutes." The workshop around them was cluttered with machinery parts, diagnostic tools, and half-assembled engine components. Everything was organized in a way that suggested controlled chaos rather than neglect. The space smelled like ozone and synthetic lubricant, but it was warm. Safer than anywhere Nira had been in days. She watched the young man move to his workbench, where he picked up a calibration tool and continued working on what looked like a thruster assembly. He was giving her space, she realized, pretending normalcy while security forces hunted just outside. "Name's Jace," he said without looking up. "I repair small ship systems, mostly freelance work for cargo haulers." Nira didn't answer immediately. Trust was a luxury she'd never been able to afford, but her stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, betraying her. Jace glanced over, and something like sympathy crossed his face. He reached into a storage compartment and pulled out a sealed meal pack. Not fancy, but it's actual food. not the recycled protein paste they sell in the cheap quarters. He tossed it to her gently. Nira caught it, staring at the package like it might be a trick. When had anyone ever just given her something? "Eat," Jace said, returning to his work. "Then we can figure out what comes next." The meal pack trembled in her hands. Her markings pulsed once, twice, then began to dim slightly as some of the immediate panic faded. She tore open the package and ate quickly, trying not to think about how this kindness might come with a price. Everything always did. On the monitor, the security officers were moving away, their search expanding to other sections of the maintenance level. Nira watched them go, chewing mechanically, waiting for the inevitable moment when Jace would ask her to leave or demand something in return. But he just kept working, adjusting calibrations with steady hands, occasionally humming some tune under his breath. The workshop was quiet, except for the gentle hum of machinery and the distant vibrations of the station itself. Finally, when she'd finished eating and her hands had stopped shaking quite so badly, Nira found her voice. "Why did you help me?" Jace looked up, setting down his tools. His expression was thoughtful, without the disgust or fear she'd grown accustomed to seeing. "You looked like you needed it." He shrugged. "I know what it's like to be alone on this station. It's not kind to people without connections or credits. You saw my arms. It wasn't a question." "I did." He met her eyes directly. "Interesting markings. Never seen anything quite like them. But I've seen a lot of strange things working on ships from every corner of known space." Strange doesn't scare me. Nira wanted to believe him. A dangerous, foolish part of her wanted to trust the gentleness in his voice. "They'll come back," she said quietly. "They always do. They think I'm dangerous. Are you?" The question caught her off guard. Most people assumed. They saw her markings and decided she was either contaminated or defective or cursed. No one ever simply asked. "I don't know," she admitted, the words feeling like a confession. "Sometimes when I'm scared, things happen. Small things break. Electronics glitch. I can't always control it." Jace nodded slowly, processing this information. "Sounds like you might have some kind of electromagnetic sensitivity. I've heard about people with unusual interactions with ship systems, though I've never met one." He tilted his head. "You have somewhere to go? Someone waiting for you?" Nira's laugh was bitter. "I've been alone since I was old enough to walk out of the orphanage. The station tolerates me as long as I stay invisible." "Then you can stay here tonight," Jace said simply. "I've got a storage loft upstairs. It's not much, but it's warm and dry. Tomorrow we can figure something out. Why would you do that?" Suspicion crept back into her voice. "What do you want?" "Nothing." He returned to his work, giving her space again. "Maybe I just don't like seeing people treated like they're worthless. Or maybe I'm too soft-hearted for station life, according to my sister. Either way, the offer stands." Nira stood frozen in the middle of the workshop, unable to process this unexpected kindness. Her markings flickered uncertainly, responding to the confusion in her chest. For 5 years, she'd survived by trusting no one, by keeping constantly moving, by accepting that she would always be alone. But the workshop was warm. The food had been real, and Jace's eyes held no malice, only a quiet understanding that made something in her chest ache. "Nira," she finally said softly. "My name is Nira." Jace smiled, and it transformed his face from merely kind to genuinely warm. "Nice to meet you, Nira. Welcome to my workshop." Outside, Port Meridian continued its endless cycle of activity. Ships docked and departed, traders haggled, and 1,000 different lives intersected in the great crossroads of space. Security forces would continue their search, and the morning would bring new dangers. But for tonight, in a cluttered workshop that smelled like machinery and possibility, Nira felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not quite safety, she was too wary for that, but perhaps the beginning of hope. Her markings pulsed gently, reflecting the amber emergency lights, and for the first time, she didn't hate them quite so much. The first hints of morning cycle flickered through the workshop's small, window artificial daylight, programmed to mimic a planetary sunrise. Nira woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The storage loft where she'd slept was cramped, but surprisingly comfortable, filled with spare parts and old blankets that smelled faintly of machine oil. Below, she could hear movement. Jace was already awake, working on something that made soft clanking sounds. Nira descended the narrow ladder carefully, her muscles stiff from yesterday's desperate flight through the station corridors. "There's water in the dispenser," Jace called without turning around. "Not the recycled stuff. I pay extra for the good filtration." Nira hesitated, then moved to the small refresher unit in the corner. When she caught her reflection in the polished metal surface, she barely recognized herself. Her dark hair was tangled, her face smudged with grime, and the bioluminescent markings on her arms seemed dimmer in the daylight, barely visible beneath her skin like faded tattoos. She scrubbed her face and hands, watching the water spiral down the drain. Such a simple luxury, but one she'd often gone without in the station's lower levels, where public facilities required credits she didn't have. When she emerged, Jace had set out 2 meal packs on his workbench, cleared of tools. "Breakfast," he announced. "We should probably talk about what happens next." Nira sat on a stool across from him, opening the meal pack slowly. "I should leave before I cause you trouble. Security will expand their search. About that." Jace pulled up a datapad, showing her a news feed from the station's public network. "They're saying you stole medical supplies from a clinic in Sector 7. That you're dangerous and possibly suffering from radiation poisoning that makes you unstable. That's not true." Nira's markings flared briefly with her anger. "I've never been to Sector 7. I just took food from a market stall." "I know." Jace's voice was calm. "But it means they're escalating. Making you sound more dangerous than you are gives them justification for a wider manhunt." He studied her thoughtfully. "I have a sister who works in medical services, Myra. She's not stationed here officially anymore, but she still has access to diagnostic equipment. If we could understand what your markings actually are, maybe we could figure out how to help you control whatever's happening." "Why do you keep helping me?" The question burst out before Nira could stop it. "You don't know me. I could be everything they say I am." Jace was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against the workbench. 3 years ago, I came to Port Meridian with nothing but a toolkit and a few credits. My parents died in a mining accident, and I had nowhere else to go. I was 17, scared, and everyone I met either wanted to exploit me or ignore me completely." He met her eyes. "Then a cargo hauler captain named Reeve gave me a chance. Let me work on his ship, taught me advanced systems repair. He didn't have to do that, so you're paying it forward." Nira's voice was skeptical. "Maybe." Jace smiled slightly. "Or maybe I just recognize someone who's been dealt a bad hand through no fault of their own. Either way, I'd like to help if you'll let me." Before Nira could respond, the workshop door chimed. She tensed immediately, her markings beginning to glow. Jace raised a hand in a calming gesture and checked his monitor. "It's okay. That's Myra." The door slid open to reveal a woman in her early 30s with the same dark hair as Jace, but sharper features and an air of professional competence. She carried a compact medical scanner case and assessed Nira with quick, analytical eyes. "So this is your stray," Myra said, closing the door behind her. Her tone wasn't unkind, just matter-of-fact. "Jace sent me your vital readings from last night. Interesting biosignature. Nira pulled her arms closer to her body instinctively. I'm not some experiment. No one said you were. Mira set down her case and began unpacking equipment. But if you want to understand what's happening to you, we need data. I've seen a lot of unusual genetic expressions working on frontier colonies. Your markings look like a form of bioluminescence, but there's something else going on. Something that interacts with electrical systems. How do you know that? Nira asked warily. Mira gestured to Jace's workbench, where several tools were scattered in disarray. Because half the electronics in this workshop are showing minor power fluctuations. My medical scanner picked it up the moment I walked in. You're generating some kind of electromagnetic field. The words should have frightened Nira, but instead they brought a strange relief. For years, she'd been told her markings were a defect, a contamination, something wrong with her at a fundamental level. But Myra spoke about them like they were simply ... different. Will you let me scan you? Myra asked, her voice gentler now. I promise, no one else will see the data. This is just between us. Nira looked at Jace, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, she extended her arms, letting the markings show fully. In the workshop's bright light, they traced intricate patterns from her fingertips to her shoulders, swirls and geometric shapes that seemed to shift slightly when watched directly. Mira passed the scanner over Nira's skin, her expression growing more intrigued with each reading. Fascinating. These aren't just cosmetic. There are specialized cells running along these pathways that generate and store bioelectric energy. It's like you have a secondary nervous system designed specifically for electromagnetic manipulation. Which means what? Nira asked. It means you're not broken or contaminated, Chase said before his sister could respond. You're just built differently. Myra nodded. He's right. This looks like an intentional genetic modification, probably several generations back. Someone in your ancestry was enhanced for some purpose maybe, working with sensitive electronics or living in high radiation environments. The modifications have been passed down. Nira felt something crack open inside her chest. The orphanage said I was a mistake, that my parents abandoned me because I was defective. Your parents were idiots, Myra said bluntly, still studying her scanner. Or terrified. People fear what they don't understand. But there's nothing defective about you. She looked up, meeting Nira's eyes. Though you'll need training. Right now, your abilities are triggered by emotion fear, anger, stress. That's why things break around you when you're upset. You need to learn conscious control. How? The word came out as barely a whisper. Mira began packing up her equipment. That's the tricky part. I don't have expertise in this specific area, but I've heard rumors about communities in the outer systems, places where people with unusual abilities gather. Hidden colonies where they can live without persecution. Fairy tales, Nira said dismissively. I've heard those stories too. They're myths to give people like me false hope. Maybe. Myra shrugged. But I have a friend who works deep space routes. She's mentioned seeing some strange things around the Veil Nebula. Settlements that don't appear on official charts. If those communities exist, that's where they'd be. Jace leaned forward. How would we even get there? That's weeks of travel, and Nira can't exactly book passage on a commercial liner. I might know someone, Myra said thoughtfully. Captain Reeve, you remember him? He's running cargo to the outer systems next week. If I explained the situation, he might be willing to take passengers. The conversation was moving too fast. Nira felt like she was being swept along by currents she couldn't control. Wait, you're talking about leaving Port Meridian? Going into deep space based on rumors? What's your alternative? Mira asked, not unkindly. Stay here and hope security doesn't eventually catch you? Live in maintenance corridors eating stolen food until something breaks, and they have an excuse to lock you up permanently? The words stung because they were true. Nira had survived this long, but survival wasn't the same as living. Every day was a struggle, every moment colored by fear and isolation. "If you come with me," Jace said quietly, "you won't be alone. I can work on ships anywhere, and maybe out there we can find answers." Nira turned to stare at him. "You'd leave your whole life here? For someone you just met? This isn't much of a life." Jace gestured around the workshop. "I repair other people's ships so they can go places while I stay here. Maybe it's time I went somewhere too." Something in his eyes made Nira's chest tighten a warmth she didn't have a name for. No one had ever offered to append their entire existence for her before. The gesture was so enormous, so unexpected, that she didn't know how to process it. Mira watched them both with an expression that might have been approval. "I'll contact Reeve. If he agrees, you'll need to be ready to leave within 48 hours. Can you stay hidden that long?" "The maintenance tunnels," Jace said. "I know passages that connect to the lower docking bays. We can move through there without being seen by station security. Then we have a plan." Mira headed for the door, then paused. "Nira, those markings of yours aren't a curse. They're a gift that no one bothered to help you understand. Don't let anyone make you feel worthless because you're different." After she left, silence settled over the workshop. Nira sat very still, processing everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. Yesterday, she'd been alone, hunted, surviving minute by minute. Now she had people trying to help her. More than that, Jace was willing to leave everything behind to ensure she made it somewhere safe. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "Leave Port Meridian, I mean. I'm grateful for the help, but I won't let you sacrifice your life for mine." Jace moved around the workbench to sit beside her. "What if it's not a sacrifice? What if I want to go?" "Why would you want that?" He was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because for 3 years, I've been stuck in the same routine. Fix ships, earn credits, sleep, repeat. It's safe, but it's empty. And then you stumbled into my workshop with your glowing arms and your determined eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt like something actually mattered." He turned to face her fully. "I'm not doing this just for you, Nira. I'm doing it for me too." Nira's markings pulsed gently, responding to the emotion in his voice. She realized with a start that they weren't glowing from fear this time. It was something else, something warm and tentative that she'd never felt before. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Trust people. Let them help. I've been alone so long that I don't remember any other way. Then we'll figure it out together." Jace's smile was soft. "Neither of us knows what we're doing. That makes us even." Despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the danger still lurking outside the workshop walls, Nira felt herself smile back. It was small and fragile, but real. For the next 2 days, they prepared in secret. Jace gathered supplies and closed out his contracts, telling clients he was taking an extended leave. Nira stayed hidden in the workshop or moved through the maintenance tunnels during off hours, learning the paths Jace had mapped out, and slowly, carefully, something shifted between them. In the quiet moments between planning and preparing, they talked. Jace told her about growing up on a small mining station, about his parents who died when a tunnel collapsed, about the loneliness of rebuilding a life from nothing. Nira shared fragments of her own past, the orphanage, the years of running, the small kindnesses she'd witnessed but never experienced herself. On the second night, as they sat in the dim workshop reviewing their escape route one final time, Nira felt her markings pulse with that same warm sensation. Jace had fallen asleep on the workbench, exhausted from preparations, and she found herself studying his face in the soft glow. He'd chosen her, chosen to help, to protect, to leave everything familiar behind. The magnitude of that choice still overwhelmed her. Carefully, she reached out and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. Her glowing fingertips left traces of light in the air, and for once she didn't hate them. Maybe Mira was right. Maybe these markings were a gift she'd simply never learned to understand. Jace stirred, opening his eyes. When he saw her hand near his face, he didn't flinch. Instead, he caught her wrist gently, studying the patterns of light dancing across her skin. "They're beautiful," he said softly. "I know other people have made you feel like they're not, but they're wrong." Nira's breath caught. No one had ever called any part of her beautiful before. The word settled over her like a blanket, warm and unexpected. "Tomorrow we leave," she whispered. "Tomorrow we leave," he agreed. Together. And in the quiet workshop, surrounded by machinery and possibility, Nira felt the first real stirrings of something she'd thought forever beyond her reach. Not just hope for survival, but hope for something more. Something like belonging. Her markings glowed steady and bright, and for the first time in her life, she let them shine without shame.